It's my first vlog in a while, and I'm not really doing ones where I'm answering questions anymore. This one will be reviewing Monday Night Raw for March the 3rd, 2014. Um, Now, when the show started, it looked extremely promising. I mean, they cocked up a bit, saying that Bryan versus Batista, it was being promoted as a first time ever match, and they had a match about 4 years ago, if I recall correctly. So they do that quite a lot. It's a common mistake that WWE tend to make. Um, so yeah, the show started off and they hyped up the Shield versus the Wyatts again, which is it's been an extremely impressive. You can't really call it a rivalry as such, as they're both heel teams, and it looks like the Wyatts are going on to a program with Cena, and the Shield seems to be dissolving. So, but yeah, that was hyped as well. So I was really looking forward to that. The show started by Paul Heyman pulling a fast one. CM Punk's music played, and we all got hyped. And then Heyman come marching down doing his little strut. Sat in the ring, very Punk-esque like, and he started speedballing about why Punk wasn't there and such. I liked it. I liked the segment. I thought it was good because it was a good way for Heyman to first build the fans up and then draw some solid heat by basically saying he wasn't there, which then led him on to saying the root of the problem started with Undertaker and then brought him into Lesnar. So yeah, it was a good start to the show. Mark Henry come down. It was just another chance for Brock Lesnar to brutalize somebody and look extremely over the top again. Which I won't lie, I'm not Brock Lesnar's biggest fan. There's not many wrestlers that I dislike as such because I got a lot of respect for anybody that's in the wrestling industry. It's a particularly hard trade to take on and perform every week. But as Lesnar works a very lucrative contract with about 3 matches a year, possibly four, I don't rate him anymore. I mean, his first stint rounds is very impressive. He went to UFC, did his thing, he come back. I haven't got a lot of respect for guys that want to work 4 shows a year. I mean, I've always loved The Rock, but I didn't really like it when he did it, particularly to put the championship on him from Royal Rumble to WrestleMania, and he defended it once at No Way Out. So it's I haven't got a lot of time or respect for those sort of guys that work those schedules because it's kind of a slap in the face to guys like Kofi Kingston, Dolph Ziggler, The Miz, the wrestle all year round that go to the live events which aren't televised. So yeah, I'm not really pumped up for Lesnar and Undertaker as much as I have been for Undertaker's other matches at Mania. And in all honesty, I do think that Undertaker deserves a better opponent at WrestleMania. Two ideas that I thought would be a lot better for WrestleMania 30 right now with his booming popularity would have been Daniel Bryan versus The Undertaker. I think that match would have caught a lot of interest, particularly with how over Bryan is with the fans at the moment. And the other one I would have liked to have seen would have been John Cena versus The Undertaker because it's WrestleMania 30. They've never done a program between Cena and Undertaker since Cena's been over as the main guy then. So I think those two matches would have gone a lot further, really, than Undertaker Lesnar. But it's WWE's programming ultimately. Moving on from that segment, I just got to check what happened now because I watched it about. It's just finished, but I can't remember. Um, yeah, the next match was the Usos versus the New Age Outlaws, or as I like to call them, the Old Age Outlaws. Yeah, this was actually a really good match, good solid match for the first match of the show, and the Usos won the tag team championships. Very impressive. The Usos have had this coming for a long time. I mean, they were a very impressive team when they first came into it, but they weren't very noticeable because the tag team division at the time was sort of run by Jericho and those sort of teams, and they were overlooked a lot. But now they've built their way up, they've worked their way up into the main roster and competing regularly on Raw, and they've won the tag team championships, which I'm very happy about because it just goes to show that all of Triple H's buddies aren't running the show, as it seems to appear with Orton as WWE World Heavyweight Champion, Batista winning the Royal Rumble, Kevin Nash getting a guest spot at the Royal Rumble, and the Old Age Outlaws winning the tag team titles. I mean, I think that is the angle WWE want to play off, although it looks like that. But it's just not fun, and it's really not best for business, which is the whole idea, of course. But it's not even making enjoyable TV, which it should be, even though they don't want you to buy into it's really best for business. But it's not enjoyable TV. So I'm glad the Usos went over because, again, even though the Old Age Outlaws have been wrestling every week, I gotta stop calling them that. Even though they have been wrestling every week consistently. Again, they haven't been round, and it is kind of insulting to, even if you don't like them, Los Matadores, Primo and Epico, yeah, they're not as appealing or as entertaining as perhaps a team like Real Americans or even Usos. But no, it's good. It's good to see a team like the Usos pick up the tag team titles now, and hopefully, what seems to be a promising tag team division can continue to grow. Um, After that, a very abrupt match between Cesaro and Big E, pretty much the same as last week. Swagger costing Cesaro the match. Um, yeah, uh, I want Cesaro to break off from the group and have a face run. I mean, it would certainly reinforce the whole Real Americans thing as Cesaro's Swiss. And I still think it's ridiculous that he was even paired, but it worked. It worked really well. Now it's time for the split, and I think that'll culminate with a match between Swagger and Cesaro at WrestleMania. And if they've got any sense, they'll put Cesaro over to help begin what will hopefully be a very good face run for the Swiss Superman. I'm really, really impressed that WWE are starting to take notice of Cesaro because, you guys know me, and I'm a huge, huge, huge Kings of Wrestling fan, going back to Claudio Castagnoli and Chris Hero. Um, so yeah, it's good to see Cesaro finally get the recognition that he deserves and has deserved for a long time in WWE. That has to be said. And completely off from Raw. I don't know if any of you saw NXT Arrival, but the opening bout between Antonio Cesaro and Sami Zayn just blew my mind. I I find it hard to believe that NXT can produce a match of that quality, and yet the main event of WrestleMania is going to be Batista versus Randy Orton. Um, yeah, so that was that. But there you go. The next match was the Shield versus the Wyatts, and again, this match was just as good as the bout at Elimination Chamber. Seth Rollins on fire, double suicide dives, and just this match had everything. The interesting turning point was when Seth jumped off the apron when Ambrose was looking for a tag. But obviously, if you watched it, there was 2 or 3 points in the match, I think, where Seth was looking for the tag, but both Reigns and Ambrose were distracted, not on the apron. So I think it was the best thing to do, although I didn't think it at first, because the fact that Rollins has been playing the middleman between Ambrose and Reigns, who've been falling out consistently, for him now to be having an issue with it, it's going to work well because I think it would actively send all three of them off their own separate way, which is the best thing to do. Because at one point I thought Rollins and Ambrose turning on Reigns, as Reigns has been really over since just before the Royal Rumble, and that's continuing to grow. So I think now the best thing to do would be to send them all their own separate ways, and if they've got any sense, they should make a triple threat for the United States title at WrestleMania between all three members of the Shield, which, in all honesty, Roman Reigns will probably win. But yeah, I think that would be the best thing that WWE could do. But I'd be very disappointed if they don't, because they'd be missing a huge opportunity. At the same time, it'd be kind of sad to see the Shield end, because I've been a big fan of the Shield since they came into it. A lot of people keep calling them a rip-off of the Nexus, a rerun of the Nexus. They're not. They've got a completely different look, and the whole build behind them is different. The Nexus were making a stand for guys that get treated like animals. The Shield, they're making a stand against injustices, which, it's your perception of it, but I think the Shield are far more successful than the Nexus ever were in 2 attempts. So, yeah. That match was very good. It ended with Ambrose being pinned by Bray Wyatt. Yeah, it was a good match. And it made sense for the Wyatts to keep winning, as I think, as I say, they are trying to build up John Cena versus Bray Wyatt for WrestleMania now. A rerun of the mixed tag team match. Santino and Emma against Fandango and Summer Rae. I wasn't really interested, but Emma picking up the victory with a submission move, the Emma lock. Things actually look promising for Emma. The Divas division is lacking any divas with a proper competitive nature. I mean, obviously, I'm a huge AJ fan, and I mean huge, that ass, man. But yeah, seriously, they need they need more solid wrestling divas and not Barbie divas. Now, I watched the. I'll get to it in a bit with the Bellas tag team match. They actually use a lot more wrestling moves in this one, which I haven't really seen from the Bellas before, which was different. But perhaps they are actually taking note that to be a memorable diva, like Trish Stratus and Lita, for example, you've really got to put as much in as you want to get out, which a lot of today's divas don't. They're content with the hair pulling, slapping, and every now and again a Thesz press. So, it's promising signs, but they're still lacking a real competitive divas division, which is why I think Emma could help. A gimmick is a bit goofy, but that could work. I mean, it works for Santino, so you never know. Um, Moving on, we had Christian versus Sheamus. This is a rerun of a rivalry that we've seen before. Um, Not really interested in it, but I am a mark for both Christian and Sheamus. Excuse me. So yeah, I'm just kind of glad that they will both get a spot at Mania. I don't think it was ever in doubt that Sheamus would really, but for Christian, it's been an up and down road because he's had several injuries over the last 3 or 4 years, which has been really unfortunate on his career. So yeah, just knowing that both those guys will get a spot at Mania is promising, even though the rivalry isn't interesting me that much. I think Sheamus won with a bro kick from the apron, a new spot. I mean, you've got to keep it fresh, otherwise it's predictable if he's broken up every time for the win. So yeah, not a bad match in all honesty either. Solid performance. After that we had the Bellas, Roxana versus Lisa Fox. As I said, it was a little bit better than the matches the Bellas normally have, particularly from the point of view of Nikki Bella, because Brie has been a lot better the last couple of weeks. Now I say weeks, months, even just going back to before Christmas when she had that feud with AJ. So it's good to see them actually incorporating moves into their match now and showing a bit of versatility, which you haven't really seen from them before. So that's promising. Um, Moving on, um, we had the Triple H, Daniel Bryan, Stephanie McMahon segment. This was actually really good. Um, I liked it because it it is good because they need to have, if they are going to build up Bryan and Triple H, they need to have that sort of in ring compatibility then, where you can see that Bryan is really trying to fight the machine and Triple H is just denying him at every turn. There was actually some funny lines, one of which was Stephanie's about the only time you'd have a microphone if it wasn't for us was to, do you want fries with that? And that was pretty funny. But Daniel Bryan just kept winning the fans over by mentioning that it's their company. Easy face technique, but it's winning the fans over. So that was a pretty interesting segment. Eventually, Steph ended up calling Kane, who Bryan dived onto, started brawling. Then she called for security, which brought 4 referees out for some reason. Then security did eventually send Bryan to the back end in the segment. Next up was Alberto Del Rio versus Dolph Ziggler in a match that most of it was taken up by a break. Aaron Paul drove Ziggler out in a very fancy car. Ziggler won with a zigzag. I'm glad to see Ziggler on Raw, but they're not really doing anything with him. I could do an entire vlog on Dolph Ziggler's mistreatment. There's 3 guys in particular that I could constantly bring up for being misused in WWE. It's Dolph Ziggler, The Miz, and Kofi Kingston. All 3 of them are solid performers who we haven't seen the best of yet. That's without shadow of a doubt. Um, Obviously, Dolph and Miz have climbed the mountain once. They've been there. Dolph's reign was cut short. Miz had a successful reign, even went over Cena at WrestleMania, as hard as that is to believe. Kofi, we haven't seen him in that main event capacity, and until we do, we don't know what sort of a player he's going to be, which is a shame because I really do feel that Kofi Kingston is one of the most promising talents on the roster. But the older he gets, you can't keep applying the term promising to. So the longer he's mistreated for, he's just going to fizzle out, remembered as being a solid mid-carder throughout his career, which is a shame. I don't want that for Kofi because he does work hard, probably harder than most. You can see he's consistently trying to work his way up, and every time it looks like it might happen, it just gets killed off. Um, so yeah, bit of a shame. But Dolph did win the match, and that was that. Paul Bearer was then announced to be the next Hall of Fame inductee. Very glad about this. Paul Bearer does deserve a spot in the Hall of Fame. I mean, I can only think of Bobby the Brain Heenan and Mr. Fuji that are already in there for managers. Jimmy Hart as well, of course. So it's good to see Paul Bearer going in now, especially after some of the stuff they've done with him down the years with The Undertaker and Kane. I know he was with Mankind briefly, but that was before I was really into it. But I know my stuff. I've watched stuff on it, and Paul Bearer is fully deserving of a spot in the Hall of Fame. Um, Up next was Big E versus Swagger. This one didn't even get underway. Cesaro just, anything you can do, I can do better, and hit Big E with the neutralizer. Then this led to Cesaro dropping Swagger to the mat and going for the Cesaro swing, but Zed stopped him, told him not to do it, told him to help up his brother. A lot of tension. I think that's going to set up Cesaro versus Swagger a WrestleMania, which I like because it means Cesaro will be getting a spot on the card, and Swagger is also a solid worker. Like him or dislike him, you gotta give the devil his due. He does put on decent matches. Obviously, there are 100 different things I would prefer for WWE to do with Antonio Cesaro at WrestleMania, but they're just not going to happen. So just be grateful that he's going to have a spot on the card more than anything. Yeah, that was that. Um, Cena comes out to talk about the Wyatts. Obviously, he's in Chicago, and if you know your WWE history, you know that Chicago does not like John Cena for whatever reason that may be. Um, but yeah, this time it's not as normally one-sided as it is against Cena. There was at least enough people to start the "Let's Go Cena" part of that chant. But yeah, another solid promo for Cena. I mean, he does recycle the same sort of thing that he says in his promos about having to go through him to be the best, and says everything with a lot of intensity. A big thing that I do like about this is that WWE can appreciate that these new stars need to start coming through. So in other years, WWE would not have dared to have put anybody up and coming against Cena. I mean, you look at his last WrestleMania matches: The Miz, uh, Edge and Big Show, Batista, Triple H, Shawn Michaels. So, JBL is since his climb up the mountain. It's always been somebody that's solidly in the main event position. Bray Wyatt, not so much, which is why I'm all for this. And knowing WWE, they'll put Cena over him because good has always got to prevail over evil in their mind when it's Cena. But if they've got any sort of sense, and if they want any of these young stars to start coming through, Bray Wyatt should go with John Cena at WrestleMania. I'm not a Cena hater. I'm actually a big fan of John Cena and his work rate and his work ethic, because he does always put as much in as he possibly can. And I think this rivalry for Bray Wyatt can be the turning point, and after WrestleMania, if Bray Wyatt does go over Cena, it can then start to establish Bray Wyatt as a potential new main event star that can be challenging for the WWE World Title, which is what they want to be doing and what they need to be doing, because Cena's 36, and if that knee injury sustained last week was serious or even unscripted, then they need to start looking at who the next guys are. Like, he's no, he's only got so many good years left in him before he becomes a Hulk Hogan. Then, and that's something they want to avoid if possible. Especially now as CM Punk's out of the picture, who, by the way, the fans chanted for all night long. Fair play to them. There wasn't one match on that show where the WWE fans did not chant his name. Got to give it to them, but it is Chicago after all. So yeah, a very vocal crowd in Chicago as well. I like the fact that they were well behind the Usos, who got a nice pop when they won the titles. Um, Always very vocal towards Cena. Um, yeah, the Cena promo culminated with the Wyatts coming on to the Tron. Bray giving his usual spiel, and again, it's going in the right direction. So I like the way that one's going. Um, After the break, Alexander Rusev came out to stand on a podium. Yeah, made zero sense, but this big Bulgarian beast should be coming to Raw within the next couple of weeks and start competing. His showing in the Royal Rumble was fairly impressive, actually, but as WWE's history with big guys go, you come in as a dominant heel to begin with, and you look at the great Khali and Tensai. You have a run for a period of time where you're considered a solid face, and after solid heel, sorry, and then after a while you turned into a joke baby face. Probably what's going to happen with Rusev, particularly when, like Vladimir Kozlov is another example. You're brought in to be this menacing force, and by the time it's all said and done, you're a complete joke. So hopefully Rusev's future is more promising than that. I wouldn't want anybody's career to go down the pan before it's really taken off, but only time will tell. And then that brings me to the main event. Randy Orton comes out and sits at ringside, so you already know that he's going to do something. Nobody's ever come to watch a match and not get involved. The match itself was okay, nothing impressive. Um, uh, I was more disappointed by this point that CM Punk hadn't returned. Obviously, big CM Punk fan, and I did want him to come back on that night because there was 100 different ideas that went through my head of what he could do. When Triple H, Kane, and Stephanie come down towards the end, I thought, right, perfect setting. You know, after the match, Orton and Batista are going to go off and do their thing, fighting, and then you've got Triple H and Kane in the ring with Bryan, QCM Punk, and you set up a tag team match for WrestleMania. That didn't happen. Then I had the idea that CM Punk could come down for the save and then kick Bryan in the head and align himself with the Authority as a shock to everyone and set up Punk and Bryan at WrestleMania. That didn't happen. The fact that Punk did not return in Chicago tonight tells me that he will not return before WrestleMania now. If there was ever a time to bring him back before WrestleMania, it would have been tonight because that would have been the best place for business to have done it. And they didn't do that, so don't count on CM Punk before WrestleMania. Um, yeah, it ended up with Orton clotheslining Bryan, which would have given Batista the win. But then he went for Batista. Batista pushed him off the RKO. Bryan hit him with a running knee. Kane got up on the apron. He kicked him off and landed on Triple H, which then led to Triple H and Kane getting in the ring. Triple H mouthing off to Bryan. He got a boot in the side of the head for it. Batista bombed Bryan and Triple H pedigreed him with the familiar sight we've seen since last August of members of the Authority standing over a fallen superstar. Boring. We've seen it before. Broken record. It's looking inevitable now that CM Punk and Daniel Bryan will happen at WrestleMania. That is disappointing. Very disappointing from my perspective. Triple H in his own right is a very accomplished and experienced in-ring veteran who does put on good matches. It has to be said. But I have no interest in seeing Daniel Bryan versus Triple H at WrestleMania. Just like I have no interest in seeing Batista versus Randy Orton at WrestleMania. Just like I've got no interest in seeing Brock Lesnar versus The Undertaker at WrestleMania. All the matches that look to be going in so far, I can say I do not give a rat's ass about. I mean, I just don't see unless WWE can do something that'll really shock me at Mania, like Punk returning in Bryan's match with Triple H and then turning on Bryan. That would be the only thing that could save that storyline for me. Brock and Undertaker. Mm, Again, Undertaker deserves an opponent with more class than Brock Lesnar, personally. Um, so yeah, for what is supposed to be the biggest WrestleMania in X amount of years, looks very, very bleak at the moment. And right now, I can't believe I'm saying this, but The Rock and John Cena's repeat last year probably had more of my attention than what's going into this year, which is a damn shame because WWE looked like they were taking so many positive steps forward, which now seems to be reversed. Um, so yeah, it's just a waiting game really to see if they can do anything out of the ordinary that could shock me. It's safe to say I would give up on WWE completely if Brock Lesnar ended the streak, which he won't. I highly doubt that he would, because it's just unethical, really, for all these guys like Shawn Michaels, whose career was ended by the Undertaker at WrestleMania, for Brock to come along and end that streak. It would just be a slap in the face of the 19 other guys that he's already beaten at WrestleMania. 18. If he's fought, yeah, Kane twice, Michaels twice, Triple H twice, that makes 18, I think. But so yeah, that's my thoughts on Monday Night Raw, guys. I know that was very. I didn't really have anywhere I was going with that. I just sort of went with it as I started reading. But I would love to hear your thoughts on everything I've had to say. And that's about it from me. I might start doing more vlogs on specific topics. Like if you guys want to hear my thoughts on who I want to start seeing in the main event picture and who I would take out. Batista, Randy Orton. Yeah, so you're more than welcome to pitch me some ideas for future vlogs. But for now, WCRP, I gotta write that time. I've been Bentley, and thank you for watching.